This webinar is made possible through the Specialty Crop Block Grant given by the Texas Department of Agriculture to the Sustainable Food Center in Austin, Texas. The Sustainable Food Center has partnered with the National Center for Appropriate Technology in San Antonio, Texas, and Foodshed investors in Austin, Texas, to help farmers become more wholesale ready.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kara Kroger, and I work for the National Center for Appropriate Technology in San Antonio, Texas. And I'm joined by my colleague, Robert Maggiani today, and Ellen Polishuk, who owns Plant to Profit. And we are going to be doing a webinar on exploring wholesale markets and seeing how low you can go with your pricing, where you can enter the wholesale market and still turn a profit. So Ellen, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you are and where you come from.
Okay, thanks, Kara. My name is Ellen Polishuk. I live outside of Washington, D.C. in the Maryland suburbs. I grew up just across the river in the Virginia suburbs of D.C. and spent most of my life farming vegetables, a little bit of cut flowers and some cut herbs, all selling them into the retail market in the DC area, farmers markets, wholesale, CSA and roadside stand. And I was with that farm for 25 years, and I retired in 2017, retired from farming, not from working, and pursued with vigor my next career, which is in consulting and teaching to the same kinds of growers that I was myself. So I do all kinds of one-on-one work with farmers around the country on whatever issues are problematic for them at the time, from soil fertility to labor management to finding profit. So I'm excited and grateful to be part of this project here in Texas, and have had a wonderful time working with both Kara and Robert on developing this material and delivering it to you. So I hope you find some value in it. All right, exploring wholesale markets, how low can you go? So just to put out right from the beginning, everything I'm going to talk about today can be applied to retail markets. So these tools are designed for crop costing or enterprise budgets in any sales scenario. So these are not specific tools for just wholesaling. So use them in whatever context you're considering entering with your crops. Okay, so how low can you go? Basically, at what price can you still make a profit, or at least cover all your costs, including your take-home pay? So this is a retail example that I'm starting with, just to make things confusing. And this is a quote or a quotation from any number of growers that I've come across in my time. And it seems like folks who are in the retail space of farmers markets, this exact phrase has come out of countless farmers' mouths. I sold out of carrots in 2 hours. I should grow more, right? Usually they don't even ask. They say, I sold out of carrots in 2 hours. I'm gonna grow more, period. But I'm turning it into a question. And because I want to stimulate your thinking, and I want to check in and see if you have made this kind of statement or question yourself after having a really great customer response to your product, whether it's in the wholesale market or whether it's in the retail market. You sold out of everything before you thought you would. Does that mean you should grow more and sell them at that same price point? Okay, so I'm giving away the answer, but if anybody wants to jump in, just come on ahead. What's the key area that we need to examine in order to answer this question? Should I grow more? Yeah, Robert.
Well, there's a whole bunch of things that you have to consider. How much are you trying to sell? How much land do you have available if you want to change your production schedule? Do you have the right equipment if you want to grow more carrots rather than what you're growing now? Do you have a root washer that you can use that can help you actually prepare more carrots? A whole bunch of different questions you have to answer.
Good. Those are all good production questions. And the question that I want to answer today, or the question I want to focus on today, is the question, Are you making any money at those carrots at the price that you sold out there at the market? If you sold out in 2 hours and you lost 50 cents a bunch for every one that you sold, do you think you should grow more? Okay, so the answer is no. If you lost money, should you try and lose some more? No. But how do you know if you lost money or made money? Because trust me, most of you don't know. In fact, you don't even have an educated guess. You're hoping. Okay, that's normal. That's normal in this this area of small-ish scale sustainable farming. What is an enterprise budget and why use one? So we're working with two terms today that I'm going to use interchangeably: enterprise budget or crop costing. So an enterprise budget is an estimate of the costs and returns to produce a product. For me, in the rest of my life, when I'm not doing this talk, I think of enterprise as being a collection of crops. So for me, growing vegetables is a whole enterprise. Growing cut flowers is a different enterprise. Keeping bees and making honey is an enterprise. But in the old school Department of Agriculture or agriculture schools, they've used the word enterprise to mean one single crop. Okay, so I'm going to continue to talk about crop costing, but enterprise budget is also a valid term. So the old school or the original enterprise budget concept is what I'm calling a budget model, a bottom-up model of doing this kind of analysis. And just because I call it old school is not a denigration. I'm old school, okay? I'm 56, I'm plenty old school, and there's lots of things in agriculture that we do old school that I totally respect and I'm all for. So that's not a mean word. Bottom-up model, and this is sort of the order of events of working with a traditional enterprise budget. You figure out your costs, you project a yield figure based on your own growing history or one that you're pulling from some other source. You project a price point, and then ta-da, at the end, there it is. Is the crop profitable or not? So I want to take a look at one of these models. This one comes out of Iowa State, Craig Chase's work. He's a great guy. He's been at this for a long time. He's got a whole suite of crop budgets that he's developed over the last 10 or 12 years. They're all available for free on the web. And he calls that suite of tools the Ag Decision Maker. You can see that up here on the top. Okay, so I chose out the carrot budget from Iowa State, and we're not going to go super over every single line, but I just want you to get some sense of familiarity of how this works. So here it is. Here's our base assumption for this model. One bed in this case is 4 feet by 100 feet. And we're growing carrots, and so now we just start filling in these blanks. The quantity, meaning what is the yield is going to come off of this one 400 square foot bed. In this case, 170 pounds, which we might say, Robert, is a little on the low side compared to other enterprise budgets we've seen. This model is going at a price of $1.50 a pound. For a wholesale setting, that's a rockin' good price for wholesale. For a retail setting, maybe that's a little bit low. And then right away, you have your total income off of that bed at $255. Then it goes into a series of specific planting year costs. Here's a number of supplies that will be needed: seeds, burlap, which I'm imagining is about keeping the top of the bed moist so that you get good germination, some fertilizer, and then it goes into labor costs. growing the cover crop ahead of time, spreading fertilizer, planting, irrigation, weeding, etc. And so we get to the bottom. I know this is a little tight on your screen, but we end up with our total, what are called direct costs for growing this carrot crop on one bed. This, just because I can't fit the whole tool on the screen at one time, here's the next piece. Okay, so we planted the crop, we weeded it, we took care of it, and now we're ready to harvest. So here starts line 34, the rest of this tool. What's the harvest cost? So in this case, this person's going to sell these in 1 pound bags. They're going to need 170 1-pound bags. There's the cost of the bags. Here's the cost of labor for harvest in and of itself. Harvest labor, packaging cost, and other, which in this case is not used. And the hourly wage or the hourly cost of labor in this example is $14.25 an hour. So here's our here's our harvest cost. They're all added together. The one that was above, the direct cost, the seeds and so forth. And then, so we have a total now of $88 of variable costs or direct costs, whatever you want to call it, the costs of growing. And then in this model, then it tries to say, well, so what are some of the overhead costs associated with a farm? And so this model lays out 3 separate ownership costs is what they call it. I would call it maybe overhead costs, same thing. What's the cost of having an irrigation system, machinery, and land? This is now per bed, okay? So those costs are assigned and given a value and add up to $11 per bed, okay? So you add the variable costs with these ownership costs, and you end up with this total down here of $100 of cost total. And then we compare it to what the income is going to be. And so annual return over variable costs is $166 a bed. Annual return over total costs is $154 a bed. And I did a little math over here on the side. So gross margin for this crop, that means before overhead, is 65%, and then net margin is 62%. These are both really, really healthy, excellent margins. Before we leave this model, I just want you to think about, and I know this has gone really, really fast, but is there anything missing in this list of costs? I know you don't have the tool in front of you, but the one that I think is the most glaring is missing is in this harvest subset. And for me, what's missing is washing. And I don't know if that was an oversight or what, but packaging is not the same as washing, and I don't think they've accounted for washing carrots, which is a significant cost. And I also think that this here is a really difficult number for any grower to come up with. What is the cost of their irrigation system for the whole farm, depreciated over how many years, and then divided all the way down to a bed? Man, that is some math that is tricky, and a lot of things could get lost in there or could look worse than they really are. So I'm not a huge fan, as you can tell, of this way of doing enterprise budgets or crop costing. Okay, but I want you to know they're out there. There's more of these kinds of tools out there, like already filled in, than the one that I'm going to show you next, right? So Carolina Farm Stewardship has 10 organic crop budgets that are very similar to this in the way they are thinking. And so they can be of value to you, especially if you're looking at growing a crop you've never grown before, where you don't really have much handle on any of the costs yourself.
They're also, Ellen, a benefit where if you look at some of the ones that come out, particularly out of the land grant colleges, and you see a listing of all the different steps in the process and all the different pieces of equipment that need to be used and all of the materials. So even if you don't know your costs, at least looking at a budget will give you an idea of, oh, I forgot to include just what you said. I forgot to include washing.
Right.
That's how these tools can help you even as you start developing your own estimate for the numbers that go in
Right.
those blocks. On the far left-hand side, for example, you can see the steps, and that's
Right.
good to know because those people, these people who do these know how to do this.
Right. They thought a lot about it. So exactly, here's a list of all the steps that are going to go in to this crop. So
Well,
excellent.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If we use the examples that are given by the land grant colleges, it might be best to use one from a state that we live in, right? Because don't they put the cost of things for that state? Aren't they a little bit more state specific about?
Yeah, I think they would be more state specific, and they would reflect the way that that crop is grown in that state more closely. I think an issue that is maybe even more problematic besides geography is whether it's organic or conventional, especially talking about a crop like carrots, which is, where weeding is one of the most expensive growing costs, is hand weeding and cultivating. That would be significantly different in a farm that is able to use conventional herbicides. So these ones from Iowa State are, he's calling them market garden, maybe he's calling them sustainable. So I think he's taking that into account. I know the ones at CFSA, Carolina Farm Stewardship, are from an organic grower's perspective. So they would include more realistic numbers. So it most likely you're going to kind of want to do a mashup, and I don't know what is there a robust set of crop costing templates from Texas?
Yes and no. The land grant college here does actually publish annual enterprise budgets by district. They divide the state into 12 different districts. So
That's right.
not only the state of Texas, but even a sub-region within the state. And you can, if you're going to grow cabbage, for example, and I picked that because I know they do a budget for cabbage in more than one district. Excuse me, you can see some of the differences that they claim are related to being in a different district. For example, when you harvest cabbage down in the valley, you harvest it at a certain time. When you harvest cabbage up further north, it's a different time of the year. So their estimated price that the grower gets is different because it's a different time of year.
Nice.
A&M does a pretty good job of paying attention to details like that. Now, having said that, they don't do very many vegetable budgets anymore. It's mostly row crop.
So the limitations, as I've already mentioned, of this bottom-up enterprise budget is I think a real conundrum here in assigning overhead cost to the crop. The land charge, the admin, labor seems, there's more to overhead than owning equipment and land. Right? And maybe you aren't thinking about that, but I'm going to tell you there's more in overhead cost than just the cost to own things, right? So if you, as the farm owner, farm manager, think about how much of your personal time is spent managing, is spent addressing the needs of your business, whether that's marketing, sales, finance, banking, accounting, hiring and firing, filling out forms, all of that is what is admin expense. And that's overhead. Those are things that have to happen for the whole farm to exist. And that's expensive. You're expensive. Also, there's always some question about the cost of machinery. There's all kinds of resources out there to help you get a sense of an hourly cost of owning a certain size tractor or implement. So So this is not my favorite kind of tool, but it's better than nothing by a long shot and can still be very useful. Okay, so let's go to another idea. And so instead of bottom up, I'm calling this top down. It's a little bit of an arbitrary description on my part. So the other kind of crop costing tool that I want to talk about, this is the flow of how it works. What is the price out there for the product? And so this requires some homework. We're going to go through these one by one. What is your gross margin goal? What are your direct costs? And then the ta-da moment is, did you reach the goal that you said you needed to for your farm to succeed? So what is the price out there for the product? Lots of different ways to go about getting price. Maybe you've already gotten a price, and we have an example later on today with a solid, true price that a grower is getting in the now. There is the agricultural marketing service that comes out of USDA that has some prices available. You can ask your friends and colleagues in competition to give you some of their prices. And then you could also be going straight to your buyer, your prospective buyer, and say, what's the range of price for the product? What is your gross margin? So we talked about gross margin pretty significantly in our first session together. But I'm going to do a little reminding here. What is your gross margin goal? That question is going to come up in this next tool. So let's talk about gross margin and gross profit. So what is gross profit? Gross profit is going to be a dollar figure. And here's how the math is going to work. Total sales, subtract out all the direct costs, seed, fertilizer, packaging. Also subtract out all the labor, direct labor, which is all the labor hours spent growing that crop. And that's going to end up with a number called your gross profit. So here's an example over here on the left side of your screen. Let's imagine this farm is doing 100,000 in sales. It's spending 28,000 in direct input costs and another 35,000 in direct labor. That leaves this farm with a $37,000 gross profit. Okay, so what needs to come out? Let's talk about this same set of numbers, and let's now talk about gross margin. Gross margin is a percentage. Here's the same numbers right here we just did. 100 minus 28 minus 35 equals 37,000 gross. I should have profit here. Shame, shame. And then what we do is we take that 37,000, we divide it by the total in sales, and that gives us the percentage, the gross margin percentage, which is 37%. Okay, what's the big deal? Now what are you going to do with this gross margin? Okay, who cares? So what this means is the gross profit, that $37,000 you have left, here's all the other things that money needs to cover. And this is a fat list, okay? It needs to cover other operating expenses that are not directly associated with this one specific crop. Tools, repairs, fees, other supplies. It covers general and admin expenses that I was talking about before. Fees, dues, utilities, capital improvements. Fixed expenses, rent, mortgage, insurance, taxes, interest. Indirect labor that I mentioned, all this overhead labor. Not just administrative labor, but there's also overhead labor called fixing things, fixing the irrigation system, mowing around the fields, keeping the deer fence clear, putting gravel on the driveway, right? These are all expenses that occur, and every bed of carrots has to throw in some money into the pot to cover even those expenses that seem extraneous, seem separate. Hey man, it's all got to come in. This is also where your money is going to come from. unless you are the person who did all the work, the direct costs. So you could have been a worker, or you were the owner doing the work. You've got to get your pay, and then comes this elusive and wonderful idea called profit. Hopefully there's some profit built in there. Okay, so that's what that $37,000 in this case, or that 37% needs to then go towards this set of expenses. So this is a very, using this conversation about gross profit and gross margin is kind of a businessy, it's a normal businessy kind of conversation in businesses outside of kind of small farming. So it's something to get a little bit used to. It can be very helpful. So the question is, what's a reasonable gross margin goal? What is your gross margin? Either for your whole farm, all your crops together, or maybe what's the gross margin in the crops that you've already been growing? So what are you already spending on that whole list of expenses? That would be a really advisable math problem for you to go through on your farm and find out what your gross margin is. If you don't have good data, or you don't have the ability to do that kind of analysis, I'm going to hand you these ideas as benchmarks for two different kinds of situations. In a retail setting, you're selling into the retail market where you're going for the big bucks, right? You're going for the biggest price you can find. You're going to go for a 40%. That's a good benchmark for your gross margin, because you're going to have fairly high selling costs, right? That's the balance that comes with high price. In the retail market comes high cost. If you're going into a wholesale market, different situation. You're going to take a lower price, you're going to move hopefully more volume, and your cost of selling is going to be substantially cheaper, right? So having a truck back up to your farm and you load on 3 pallets and off they go is going to cost very little compared to going to a farmer's market with 3 people as a 10-hour day. That's a 30-hour labor investment. You could make all that money in one truck coming in one stop. So the gross margin goal we're going to use for a wholesale, or that I suggest you use, is 20%. So this tool comes out of Kitchen Table Consultants, which is a private company based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's a consortium of consultants that work with farmers and food makers all around the country on their business, basically focusing on financial and business development, financial analysis, and helping farms and food businesses become and stay profitable. And I work with them also. I'm one of their consultants. So that's where I got this tool. So up here in yellow, these are some key points. So we've at KTC, at Kitchen Table Consultants, we teach this tool to all kinds of groups of growers. And this is the coaching that comes with inviting one of you as a grower to come in and use this tool. Key points: don't consternate. And that means don't get all balled up in indecision and dread. Just get started. Just get started throwing some numbers down there. 2, choose a crop that you think you're good at. Let's start with a positive scenario that makes it more fun. 3, leave yourself little love notes along the way in the spreadsheet as you're working it that'll say what your assumptions are. This is the best scenario I can imagine. The best weather, the best germination, the best workers. This is the best. Or, oh my gosh, this has happened before and it's terrible. We had terrible weather, terrible germination, and a lame crew. So just make those notes, because you can make numerous sheets for the same crop. Even carrots in the perfect world, carrots in the worst world, and then maybe the middle is what you work with. Notice then, start to play around with the tool when you change the yield number, what yield is going to come off of the bed, and changing price, because that's the total fun part of these tools being Excel spreadsheets, is there's all these buried formulas, and you just keep messing around with what data you're inputting and seeing how does it come out on the bottom line. In this case, the peach colored cells are the ones that are unlocked and available for you to enter. And then any cell that is gray like this, these ones are where the formulas are embedded and you don't want to mess them up. Don't be going in there. So they theoretically are locked out of your use. All right, so we're going to do carrots. So here's our crop. Carrots, we're going to measure them by the pound. In this case, we have a 300-foot bed, 2 rows on a bed. All right, that's simple enough. It's a smaller bed than the one that we previously looked at, but interesting. Step 2, now we're going to talk about yield. So what is a yield? In this case, I would say this is a happy scenario. This is a good crop. This is a good time of year. We had good germination. And this crop is going to give us 400 pounds of carrots off that 300 square feet of bed. What then is the price point that is available to you, or that you know of, or that you're trying to meet, you're trying to test? How am I going to do if I get $1.50 a pound? Okay, so there's $1.50 a pound. So immediately here's the first answer that is spit out. Your total sales is going to be $600 for a bed of carrots. And then here's this big hard question. What's your gross margin goal? Okay, maybe you've got one already on your farm, and you could say, I'm not going to put in my gross margin goal. I'm going to put in my real gross margin. And I like it because things are going well. Or maybe you don't really know, and so you're going to take one of our suggestions, and we're going to, in this case, put in 20% because we're talking about a wholesale scenario. Okay, so that was step 2. Next, we go to step 3. Most of these numbers are calculated. All you have to do is enter in how many beds of this carrot crop are you going to plant. In this case, we've picked 5. 5 beds are going to go in. That's all that happens in step 3. And but there's some interesting things happening in step 3. So the revenue, there's the $600 that we already know about, and here's your budgeted expenses. So this is running some math for you. First of all, it's going to take out budgeted money for all other. Here's where your gross margin is going to come into play. So 20% of the $600 is 120. So here's the 120 gross profit that's getting set aside for all those other overhead costs. And then that leaves you with $480 to spend on growing this crop. Okay, this is per bed on this column. This is for the 5 beds on these columns. Okay, so that's how this math is going to work. So now the program needs to know what's your cost of labor. And it does it by asking you first, what's your wage for field labor? What are you paying people by the hour? And then what is the percentage cost to account for all the taxes, fringe benefits, and other, maybe, workman's comp, all that whole package of things that comes around being an employer. So here is the final calculated cost per hour. In this case is $14. Okay. 4 steps done. Step 5. Now we get to talk about how are we going to grow these carrots. Okay. And you can add any items to this if it's a complicated crop, and you'll see we're going to look at an example of a tomato crop, which is pretty complicated in cost in terms of expenses. Carrots, maybe not so much. So cost of seed, cost of amendments, and in this case, the cost of plastic bags to package these carrots into for the wholesale market. So in this case, that adds up to 68 bucks right here of direct input costs. Next, so what it does is it says, okay, remember up here, we had $480 to spend to grow this crop. Now you just told me that it's going to take you need $68 to buy seeds and fertilizer, etc. That leaves you with $412 of budget to spend on labor. And that calculates out to 29.9 hours can be spent on growing this crop, and you will still reach the gross margin goal of 20%. Now the program says, all right, well, that's what your budget is, but why don't you tell me, how do you grow carrots? How much time is it going to take? So here's the most complicated section, step 6. This is every activity that's going to happen with this carrot crop, how many times you're going to do that activity, and then how many person minutes does it take to do each pass. And then it's going to calculate it out, what the total minutes are for this bed of carrots. So we don't need to go into this in tremendous detail. You can see it's quite rigorous. Bed prep, seeding, thinning, irrigating, fertilizing, and then we get down to the juicy ones, okay? The ones that have some big minutes. Harvest, the active harvesting, and then getting those carrots over to the wash pack shed. It's going to be done, we're going to say all in one go for this bed, and it's going to take 240 person minutes. That's a big job. And then the other really big expensive job is here, line 71, washing and packing. Again, these are dirty carrots. And again, this is going to be done all in one go. Let's just say in one session, and it's going to be 240 minutes again of time. So the program is going to subtotal it all up, 780 minutes, which calculates out to 13 hours. 13 hours. All right, so we're going to use up 13 hours, and our budget.
Ellen, let me make a comment if I could.
Yeah.
You talked earlier about, excuse me, making assumptions to yourself.
Yeah.
You're seeing these person minutes, for example, on line 71, washing, packing, and it comes out to 240 minutes. You might put to yourself as a note, that's actually 4 people for 1 hour.
Yep.
So 4 times 60 gives you that 240. That's how that you got that. But you should write yourself a note so you don't forget.
Yep, perfect. I love it. And this you could do the same thing here if you needed to. So our budget was 29, basically 30 hours we had budgeted, and we think we can do the work for 13. What does that mean? Yay! This is gonna look good. All right, so here's the grand finale. Step 7. Here's where all these numbers and shenanigans all get focused into this. Here's the scenario. You're going to grow those 5 beds. You're going to bring in 2,000 pounds. It's going to be worth $3,000. You're going to spend 340 of that on input costs, the seeds, fertilizer, bags, and you're going to spend 897 on people. That leaves you with a gross margin of $1,763. You left you with a gross profit, I should say, of $1,763, and that is a gross margin percentage of 59%. Woohoo! Because our goal was 20, and we're at 59. Okay, that is rocking. That is all systems are go. At $1.50 a pound with that yield and this cost structure, this is a totally great crop for you. You are going to be making quite decent money on this. Now, how does this compare to any other crop? I don't know. You're going to have to see. And then this last line, just for you to have in your mind, because this is a way that farmers like to think. How does that translate into the cost per unit? So the answer is, in this case, it's costing you 62 cents a pound just to grow it. Remember, we still have to add on all those other overhead costs. But the cost to just grow it is 62 cents. But we already did the scenario where we said, well, we need 20% to pay all those other costs. So this is a great crop for you in this scenario. Yay. Let's do some, just a little bit of what we call sensitivity analysis, which is let's play around. Let's change the yield, okay? So let's now say this is the crap scenario, okay? And we're gonna say, let's cut it in, let's say 225, okay? So this is significant change in yield. Here we are at the bottom line. Our gross profit is now 450 with a resulting, was also known as a 27% gross margin, which is still over our goal of 20. So even in a crap scenario of yield, in terms of yield, a crap scenario, this crop is doing its job. It's paying for itself and it's giving you enough money to pay for everything else. Now our cost to grow went from 62 cents to $1.10. Significant change, but it still works at that price point, $1.50.
Let's see what happens if you have a crap year growing and you only get $1 a pound.
Yeah, my idea too. Crap price, okay? So let's say we're gonna get $1 a pound. So we had a crap yield and our income went way down with that price to $1,100. We had the same direct cost. We had the same amount of labor. And look what happened. We got negative money. We can't even make the cost to grow. We can't even cover the labor, the seed, and the bags and the fertilizer. Never mind overhead, dude. We're not even talking about overhead. So in the worst scenario, yeah.
I have a question on that. So wouldn't we want to change the labor hours just a little bit since it was a small
Crap yield.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm with you. Let's say harvest to wash. What do you want to take off? 40 minutes, 60 minutes? Let's take off 60 minutes. So that would be 100,
right?
huh?
It was about
180.
half the amount.
Yeah, so this is crap yield equals faster harvest. Okay, and then let's change this one the same. Let's make this 180 minutes. So, okay, equals faster wash pack. Okay, now our labor hours went down, and I think it took off about $100 in cost, something like that. So now we broke even, basically. We broke even from a gross margin. So our margin went to 2%, which means we covered the cost to grow the crop, but we still have nothing left over for overhead expenses. We have nothing for overhead. We have nothing for profit. We have nothing for me, the owner. We got nothing for land insurance. We got nothing. It's not good enough. That price change just totally killed us.
So the part of the point here is that all of this is supposed to be done by the farmer ahead of time before these carrots are even planted. So this keys this person into looking and saying, okay, when the time comes and I start negotiating with the buyers what I need to get for carrots, any talk about anything below $1, I'm walking away. I'm not even talking anymore.
Right. And I have some stories from other colleagues that do this kind of work with growers, and the reports from them are, when a grower comes to a buyer and has data, spreadsheets, and can sort of back up their negotiating in demeanor and with the numbers, and they just say, I can't make it, I can't work with under $1, then it's not worth it for me. The buyer then, there's a seriousness with which the grower is speaking, and then they're like, okay, $1 is too low. And it does tend to give you a little more power in the negotiation to have a really good handle on your numbers. And then they would come back to you and say, okay, well, what do you need? Well, you then, as you went into the negotiation, it would be good to know, what do you need so that this gross margin here matches your goal, right? So let's go back up just for fun and mess with our pound or our price. So $1 just didn't cut it. So let's just try $1.20 and see where we get. All right, that was about it. So that gets us a gross margin percentage of 19, which is, let's just say, the same as 20. So they say, well, we want to pay $1, and you're like, no, I can't take $1. I have to find another place to go. I need $1.20. That's as low as I can go and still cover my costs. That kind of talk is powerful. That kind of knowledge is powerful for you to make the right decisions for your farm. Good. Yeah, let's go over, let me just mention 2 things before I leave this. At the bottom of this crop costing tool, there's a thing here called the Opportunity Assessment Scenario. This is a place that we talk about in webinar 3, where you could consider buying a special tool might do for your cost structure for a certain crop, whether that's buying a root washer or a root digger or an undercutter, or I don't even know, any kind of thing that would really change the labor, usually the labor involved in a crop. Maybe it would be a paper pot transplanter versus planting by hand or something like that. And then also, just to show you, we aren't going to go into it, but it's super straightforward and makes tons of sense. In this tool is a transplant cost tool. Okay, so we didn't talk about that with carrots because carrots are direct seeded, usually, almost always. But with lots of other crops, we're doing transplants. And unless you're buying those transplants from somebody, that totally gives you the price. But if you're growing them yourself, do you know what it's costing you per plant to pump transplants out of your greenhouse? If you don't, this is really, really good idea, and really will help you come up with a price per plant, cost per plant to grow in your greenhouse the way you grow with your cell sizes and your labor and your preferred soil mix. This is the same tool we've been talking about, but it's a different example. And this is an example that when we did this webinar live with our group, one of the growers, her name is Lorig, Middle Ground Farm, and Lorig was a brave person to volunteer to let us mess with her numbers, to go ahead and dive into this spreadsheet, this tool, and to work out the crop cost for something that has good experience with. Now, I think this is her 2nd year of production, but this case is exactly what's happening now, 2020, on her farm. Okay, so the crop is cherry tomatoes, and this is a best case scenario. So this is it's best case, but it's also what's actually happening in real time. Okay, and it's good. So she's going to sell them by the case. A case is 12 pints. In her case, her beds are 250 feet long, and of course, there's 1 row on a bed. That calculates out to 125 plants per bed. All right, step 1 is checked off. Step 2, what are you going to get for yield? So in Lorig's farm, she's consistently seeing a yield of 60 cases per bed over the course of its season. And I just, these are notes that basically are notes, me asking Lorig questions, Robert asking Lorig questions, us going back and forth, running some numbers and saying, huh, does that sound right? So, okay, so she's got 60 cases coming off that bed. And then what is the price? So this is the actual price that Lorig is receiving for her cherry tomatoes, $24.30 a case. When we first saw this number, when I first saw this number, I wasn't sure if it seemed a little high. And so I went and looked at, you know, sort of a wholesale cost or wholesale price out in the universe of all of America. And $24.30 is a really good price. Okay, because I was seeing like at the dirt cheap level, like at a auction, or is $12 a case, is about as low as it would go, and that would be not organic. Lorig's cherry tomatoes are, I don't know if they're certified organic or just growing using organic practices. I don't remember.
They are certified.
They're certified organic, so they got the
Yes.
green circle, baby.
They got it.
Yeah, right on. So she's got an awesome price here, $24.30 a case. Here's the math. And then here's the gross margin goal for a wholesale crop. We're going to use 20%. This is not based on her historic achievements. She's a new farmer or new to her land. And so we're just going to use this benchmark 20%. All right. She's going to grow 20 beds of cherry tomatoes. So here's all the math that comes with that. How much is it costing her to hire people? She's paying $13 an hour. And at the 15% fringe benefit rate, her effective labor cost is $15 an hour. So that's a little higher than one that we've seen, or it's pretty close in the ballpark. Here is a very robust list of direct input costs. So as an organic grower, Lorig is, she's very actively managing these cherry tomatoes. She's doing a lot of soil amendments. This would be amendments at planting. This is fish fertilizer that's being injected. She's also injecting potassium sulfate. She's spraying with copper. She's staking them, twining them, drip taping them. And then as a wholesale seller, she is taking on the extra cost of packaging, right? So she's got to buy the pint boxes themselves, and she has to buy the waxed box to put those 12 pints in, those are usually pretty substantial numbers. So here it is all added up, $436 going towards direct costs, and we haven't even done any labor yet. So this is pretty significant number. And so remember how the program works. It figures out, takes out the gross margin from the money that you were going to make. It gives you a total budget to grow. And then it takes out these direct costs, the $436, and it's leaving you with $731 to spend on labor. So that translates out to basically 49 hours per bed to grow these cherry tomatoes. Now, at first blush, how does that sound? Like 49 hours on a 250-foot bed? Dude, that sounds like a lot, plenty of time. I feel like this is going to be a winner. I like the way this feels right this minute. Like, yeah, that's a lot of time. We can totally do better than 49 hours per bed. But let's just line it out then. So this is Lorig's, you know, she spent a lot of time working this step. You know, and we went back and forth with her multiple times. Robert, numerous times. Me, three times. Me and Robert, two other separate times. So this is 3 sets of eyeballs and 3 brains, and probably Kara weighed in too, but I can't remember. And why am I telling you that? I'm telling you that because while at the beginning I said don't consternate and get started, at the end I want you to want you to really bang your head against this a few times. And if you could invite somebody else's set of eyeballs in to look at it with you and say, what do you mean you spend that much time? Or how do you do it that fast? Or, hey, you forgot about thinning or whatever. You will end up with a better, more rigorously done tool. So that's the reason why I tell you the story. All right, so we got every kind of thing: hand weeding, trellising, irrigating, spraying the fungicide. We got going back and forth to the field, cleaning up, washing and packing. And so Lorg has thought about this. She's even done some measuring, in the field. She's done some time trials. How long did it take us to do this? So these are pretty solid numbers. And so it adds up to 52 hours a bed. We had a budget of 49 hours. Okay, this is now not feeling so good. So we're over budget on labor. Let's see how this is all going to work out in the end. Step 7, the grand finale. And that's not only one bed. We're going to do 20 beds. So here's the 20 bed math. This is a $29,000 crop. This is a big deal for this farm.
Remember, that's only half an acre.
Yeah, this is half an acre. That's 30,000 on half an acre. This is a big, big crop. It costs a lot in those direct costs to grow that crop, and it costs a ton in labor to grow, harvest, and pack this crop organically. So the gross margin that is achieved in this scenario is 16%, which falls short of our goal of 20%. So even at this bang-in $24 a case price, which everybody agrees is like really, really a good price, it's not quite enough for Lorg to cover all her overhead costs. So her cost to just grow, not to market and not to overhead and not to pay taxes, just her cost to grow that flat is $20.30. Okay, that's the Lorg example. She was, she was pretty game and pretty good about seeing this all happening in front of her. And she's like, huh. So, let's play around with it, you guys. So if we were Lorg, or we're working with Lorg, which you guys are, what do we do now? What can she do differently, or what should she do differently, given that this is happening?
First place I would look would be if you'll scroll up and see the pounds per plant that we're estimating.
Yeah, let's go up to yield. Sorry about the going fast.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would ask myself, why is she only getting
60 cases.
2.8 pounds of tomatoes per plant?
Yeah, so here's the math I was telling you about that
Right.
Robert and I were messing with. So 60 cases, we're going to say they're about 6 pounds in a case, is 360 pounds of cherry tomatoes per row, divided by 125 plants in the row, is a total yield of 2.8 pounds per plant.
I would feel comfortable saying she should be able to double that.
Wow. Okay.
I think she should get, let's just say she gets 5 pounds per plant. What would that do?
Okay, so 5 times 125 is 625 divided by, we have to turn it into cases, divided by 6
Or let's just
pounds.
double it and make it easy. So instead of 60 cases, just say she gets 120 cases.
I'm going to do 104 because I did the math.
Okay.
And so now I'm going to put here, assume, you said 5 pounds.
Right, 5 pounds per
plant yield.
Which, when we were out at her farm, there was a lot of tomatoes on the plants.
So that seems like maybe it was happening.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and the prices held the same. Everything else is the same. I don't know, we might have to up the harvest time.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's follow the scenario. So basically all these, okay, now we're gonna have to up the pint boxes.
Right.
I don't remember what the price per, but let's just say 150. Let's just say 95. Okay, because we kind of went up by a third or so,
Right.
2/3. Okay, and then we're going to have to adjust our labor a little bit, and the only labor we got to change is
Those three,
harvest.
those three where you see the 12s, line 73, line 75, line 76 are the ones you'll have to.
All right, so yeah, we got to so we got more things to transport.
Right.
So let's say 30 minutes.
You're almost doubling almost doubling your production. So say 30 minutes.
Okay, 30 minutes. And then our harvest and pack, or sorry, the pack is going to be, let's say 55. And the harvest is going to be what? Something like that.
Yep.
Okay. Woo! Let's see, what was our budget? Our budget became 100 hours.
Right.
It doubled with that yield. It gave us double the labor budget. We only used up 66 hours now. And so the grand finale is boom. Nice.
Much better.
Much better. And so this income, look at how the income jumped. Remember, this was a $29,000 crop.
Right.
Now it's a $50,000 crop. Not because the price changed, but because she's got a ton more tomatoes to sell. This is beautiful. We changed that cost to grow from $20 a case to $14 a case. So she's not only met her gross margin goal, she's doubled it. So now not only can she cover all the overhead, she's going to have our favorite word, profit.
Now let's play with the price per case and see what the minimum is she can accept.
How low can she go?
Again, ahead of time, using all these same numbers and see with that production, let's say take it down to $20 a case and see what happens.
Okay, good one.
Yeah.
$20 a case.
And
All
this
right,
is
let's
what we
see.
end up.
Let's see what that does. That gave us a labor budget of 78, which I think is still going to be pretty rocking because we only use 66. All right, there we are. We're at a gross margin of 29%, which is still higher than our goal. So she could go a little lower than $20.
Yeah, so this is the way you play, you play with that to see where does that, lowest possible price that she wants to accept ahead of time. So she has that in her mind as she goes to negotiate.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Put it down at 15 and see what happens.
Okay. All right. So her buyer has backed out. Somebody else stole her spot in the store or whatever. Now she's going out and she's going to sell this in the open market where people don't give any care about organic nothing. And she's going to get $15. Is that what you said, 15?
Yes,
$15 a case. Oh, my heart is breaking. Here we go. All right, now we've got a labor budget of 50 hours, but we take 66 to do it. This is not looking good.
No.
So this is crap. We got problems.
So we had it at 20, right? And then
Yeah.
it looked good. So I would say take it down to 18. Let's see if we can zero
All
it
right.
here.
So let's see, how low
It's just
can
one
she
more
go?
try. Right. We're trying to answer that question. How low can you go?
Yeah. There we go. She can
There it
go to
is,
right
right
around
there.
$18. That is a powerful number to know as you march out into the world and make a sale. And so let's hope it is. I imagine she's done with her first crop and maybe second one's coming along.
When you look at the literature of when you do this kind of for a living, I guess like Kara and I do and you do, and you look at the literature of all the enterprise budgets for cherry tomatoes over the years, 5 pounds a plant is really on the low side. I've seen them grow in high tunnels and you get 25 pounds a plant.
Yep.
So
And
I feel comfortable that 5 pounds a plant is very doable.
It's conservative, really.
Yes.
Yeah. What we didn't do and we could have done is to go in and say, what if she's not going to sell wholesale? What if she wants to start retailing? Or what if she's going to go what I would call high wholesale, like sell them to another CSA? What if she could get even more than 24.30 a case, right? Then what happens? Then we've got money like just running on the floor. We got good things happening. Okay, so just to wrap it up. So I'm calling that the top-down crop costing tool, and it has its limitations as well. And the real one is in this gross margin. You know, just because something is a benchmark doesn't mean that it is how your farm works. So that's a huge possible downside. And how can you fix the downside? By finding out what your actual true numbers are. That's the only way. And just like any crop costing tool, it assumes that you have good access to realistic pricing and yield. Yep, but that's just the nature of the beast. You know, is either you're basing it on your growing experience, or you've talked to somebody smart like these two here, and gotten some really good numbers on price and yield. But all in all, I think it's a great tool. Both, you know, any of these tools is you know, light years better than no tool and no information and no analysis and no thinking through all those steps and no considering positive scenario, crap scenario, good price, medium price. You know, just imagine if you had this kind of data available for a number of crops on your farm, right? So what I'm always wishing for a farmer is to have a list of crops by profitability of their farm. And so anytime you're in a time crunch, which is every day, and you have a work list, that you consider the ranking of the crops by profitability in terms of who gets handled first, right? We have weeds in 14 places. Who are we going to weed first? We're going to weed the one that brings home the bacon, that makes us the most money. We have a limited amount of irrigation. Something went down. What's the one we're going to water? Absolutely top of the list. You know what I'm saying? Like that's precision agriculture. In my view, right?
Good point. Yeah.
I know that's not how the rest of agriculture is using that word, but to me, that's farming like you want to make a living, people. Hello. Okay, that's my wish for all of us, and that involves doing this kind of head banging, number crunching, looking up stuff on the web, and having records that you've kept of your reality to plug in.
Also, you know, just year after year, this will get easier and easier. The more of these that you have filled out, just kind of plug and play with it each year as you build on them.
Yeah.
That's another thing to remember, that when you're starting a business, it's you really got to put the work in, but then you have these nice tools that you can reference and know better where you're headed. So
Yep. And wouldn't it also be sort of fantastic for you know, for areas of growers that are associated with each other through they all sell to the same co-op, whatever it is, to share those numbers with each other, or with a new person, you know, coming in and saying, well, this is the crop analysis I had for carrots, and so that's why I don't grow them, or that's why I don't sell them wholesale, I only take them to the farmer's market, or whatever it is. Wouldn't that be cool if those kinds of things that could get that information could get spread around, and people can say, well, watch me, I'm going to make my numbers different, I'm going to do it faster, cheaper, whatever, because I got this tool, or I got this best soil ever, or whatever it is.
well, thank you very, very much, Ellen, for going through that with us. It's going to be very helpful to a lot of people, I know. And if anybody has any questions down the line, you're more than welcome to email both Robert and I at NCAT. So my email is karak@ncat.org. That's KARAK@ncat.org. And Robert's is robertm@ncat.org. So ROBERTM, as in Maggiani.
Yep, that would be it.
And Ellen, you can visit her website at planttoprofit.com as well. So, and we'll hopefully get these up on the screen here for y'all soon too, so y'all can see those visually. But we really appreciate your time, Ellen. It's been a lot of fun. And
Yes, ma'am.
if we can be of any help to any of the growers out there, please let us know. We're glad to answer your questions. So
Yeah, thanks a million, Ellen. It's been
You're
great.
welcome. It's great working with you. Go
Okay.
Texas.